Lovely job. All right. So comfortable sitting first of all. Now, if any of you out there sitting cross-legged, anybody sitting cross-legged? If you are, then make sure your knee. If you put your hands on your pelvis, I'll show you what I mean by it. I've got a lot of stuff here. If you put your hands on your pelvic wings here, yeah, then make sure your knees are below that if you're sitting cross-legged. So sit up on something otherwise, because otherwise your psoas muscle, the psoas major, will be relatively active, and that is going to the fascial webs of the psoas feed up into the bottom legs, the crura of the diaphragm, and if that's sitting tight, and if you've got asymmetry, which everybody is asymmetrical, by the way, in your body you are asymmetrical. There isn't a question about that, really. To be honest with you, there isn't. Okay, so you're going to have asymmetry in your structure. So if you're sitting there with your knees high and one knee higher than the other, you're actually affecting the way you're breathing already, detrimentally potentially. So that's why I'm saying sit up on something if your knees are lower than that. It's really helpful to do that. Okay. I just want to say a big shout out to Lynn Leong there. Hello, Lynn. I haven't seen you for ages. Really nice to see you. That's all. All right. Just hey, beautiful. I'm sure I know some others of you out there, but I can't see everybody right now. So get in that position there, and that's helpful, because if we're going to do breath work, you have to understand some aspects of functional anatomy. And what I'm talking about tonight is the four powers. And the four powers, the first of those is systematics. And systematics means that if we're going to go, have you all heard of spiritual bypassing? Has everybody heard of spiritual bypassing these days? Everybody heard of it? It's a thing. It's a big thing, right? And it comes from a verticality tradition where people believe that up there somewhere is good and beautiful, and down here it's a bit smelly and rotten. Basically, it comes from that kind of verticality metaphor. Cranium over anus, I call it, by the way. Yeah, you know, bipedal organisms, we have our cranium over our anus, we forget that we shit. Simply put, forgive me, but that's the way it is, okay? So we come up with these fantastic verticality metaphors, and we call them all sorts of things. I'll be careful what I say here, but one of them terms we might use is religions, dualistic religions, where up is good and down is bad, all right? You get that kind of principle. So avoiding verticality metaphors, yeah, then if you go with that kind of verticality metaphor, you want to get to the good place. You want to go to the place that's blissful and happy and nice right now, because you've forgotten that this is it. Yeah. So what you do is you'll do practices that get you high, that get you ripped, that get you to a big state, and you can feel amazing right now. And yeah, it's just like taking drugs.
Hi.
And that is bypassing, basically.
Hi, I've got two things going.
I'm just going to mute everybody. Okay.
Sorry, I'll turn it down.
I got you. Don't worry about it. I've got you muted there. All right. So no worries. So what I want to do is avoid that kind of thing, because it's a no-brainer. It's not going anywhere. Yeah. So what instead I'm interested in is systematics, and systematics is building up the power of your practice over time. So the first thing I said tonight was feel into your psoas, feel into your body. Make sure you can sit upright. Make sure your psoas is switched off. That big spinal stabilizing muscle that runs along the front of your spine into your legs. That's really important. Otherwise, you'd be affecting your breathing and you'd be limiting your breath work. What else? Simply put, shoulder blades. Roll your shoulder blades. Take a breath in and roll your shoulder blades up and down your back for a moment. Squeeze them forwards and feel them come forwards like this. And then lift them up around your ears. Use your breath to do that. Use an in-breath to come up and wiggle your spine a little bit. Any kind of movement that feels good here. And drop them right back down your back. And do that a few times so you can feel the muscles around the shoulder blades that do that job. You don't have to name them right now. It's useful to get to know them, right? The rhomboids and the serratus and all these different structures that do this, the pectoralis minor and so on, but it's not necessary right now to do that. But if you get into that, and I'll tell you why, because in modern bodies, modern post-industrial bodies, often the head is slightly forward. Yeah, the shoulder blades are what's called medial rotator. They come around slide around the ribs slightly, and then the shoulders are kind of drop forward a little bit like this. And if your shoulders are like that, and you've got a habit of sitting like that, and I can see a couple of you already doing it, by the way, just saying, all right, then what's going to happen is that's going to limit your breathing. So you can do some strong breathing, but it will never be as good as it can be if you just get those shoulder blades replaced and put that down to where evolution intended them to be, rather than where our post-industrial society kind of encourages them to be. All right. So does that make sense? Just to start. Okay, so far? If you've got anything you want to chuck up in the shout in the chat, put it up there and I'll try and catch it. If you've got any questions, you can put it in the chat box, okay? And I'll try and catch those as I go along. So if you're not sure of what I'm saying, or if you've got any questions, chat box is down there. Just chuck them in. All right. So shoulder blades really important. Next thing is, if you're going to be doing full, deep, conscious breath work, actually, you have to train your nose, right? So many breathwork practitioners these days are breathing through the mouth because that's what's come through various different schools. Now, the schools I've worked with over time, that's a bit of a no-no. That's a bad idea. Now, if you want to look at science on that, then I highly recommend you read James Nestor's book. If you look at James Nestor's book, it's called Breath. Really good book. And there's a whole chunk in there on mouth breathing and how bad it is for you. So let's try it out. Let's do a bit of mouth breathing, okay? Let's breathe through your mouth for a few breaths and see how it feels. And put one hand on your belly and one hand on your chest and see what happens when you do that. Now, what James is suggesting in his book, and what my experience is, and this is the experience of thousands of years of breathwork practice from the yogic tradition and from the Chinese Qigong tradition and various other traditions, is that mouth breathing is really bad for you. And what the science is saying these days is if you keep mouth breathing, you're going to end up with a cardiovascular condition, you end up with stress-based conditions, high levels of inflammation, and all sorts of physiological complexities in terms of how it affects your face, your facial structure, your teeth, all sorts of things. It's a bit of a no-brainer. So if you're not going to mouth breathe when you're doing your rebirthing breath work or some kind of thing, you're going to do something else. How are you going to do that? Well, the simple answer is the power of systematics. You're going to train your nose. Now, right, so I'm going to help you to start that process off. First of all, I'll take my glasses off for a second. I can't see you as well. You're all a bit fuzzy then, and I won't be able to read the chat box. Give me a moment. Okay, what I want you to do first of all is to get your fingers on the sides of the nose here and come into a nose breath now. Come into a nose breath as you're doing this. So breathe in through the nose best you can. Even if you're a bit clogged up, it'll be fine, right? And I want you to stripe fairly firmly from the bridge of the nose outwards across the face like this with fingers, and just draw those fingers out across the face, breathing, breathing, breathing as you're doing it, yeah? And then across like this, down and out. Breathing in as you're stretching these face muscles, just to start with. And a few times just stretching, and then we're going to come into little round movements, wriggly movements like this, rolling around as you're breathing in. And if it sniffs, it's fine. Sniffing is fine. Okay, and then start at the top and then come down the nose a bit lower down, a bit lower down, a bit lower down. So it's about 4 stripes across, and until you end up in the bottom corner of the triangle, the hole in your skull.
It's cooking.
Just mute. Somebody's cooking something. Just a second. Mute everybody again. If you can keep yourself muted, that'd be cool. Thank you. All right. So until you end up in the bottom hole of the triangle of the skull here, like that, and stretch that structure open. Now, if any of you have been mouth breathing for a period of time, even if you do it in your sleep, the nasal passages will be reduced. And again, read James's book. It's fantastic. It goes into the details of that. I don't have to fill the session with this one. You can read it. You can do a bit of homework on that. Okay. So one way we can start doing is starting to train the nose to breathe in through the nose. And you can then, over time, as you practice, do the most powerful kind of breath work through your nose. Now, let me give you an example. Native American children back in the day were taught by their mothers to breathe through the nose. And mother would come when they're sleeping, if they breathe through the mouth, and close their lips, put a finger across their lips, and teach them to breathe through the nose. And an Apache child, when it came of age, had to run 50 miles across a hot desert with a mouthful of water and then spit it out at the end, breathing through the nose all the way. Right? So many cultures have looked at how to train their children in nose breathing. And we've kind of lost that in the modern world. And James is really big on that. So I recommend, again, his book. All right. So this stroking over the nose is the first part of it, coming into these sinuses, massaging in here, breathing in as you're doing it. Second part is to push the tongue up against the top of your mouth. So you get the tip of your tongue and push it up. There are 5 points that we can use in conscious breath work along the roof of the mouth that have different effects. But the one I want you to feel into right now is the cerebral point right on the top of the mouth. So if you feel in there and push your tongue up, it's the place right at the top where you've got where you can reach the top of the curve. Yeah, we might use one of the other ones today, but there are 5 that I know of, at least anyway, that are useful. Okay, so press your tongue against the top of the mouth and then push the belly of the tongue slightly forwards. So the tip pushes up and push the belly of the tongue slightly forwards. And then relax your jaw best you can. The muscles here may switch on in the throat around the hyoid. Yeah. And then actively engage your nostrils and spread the nostrils as you're breathing in. I'm making a sound so you can hear me breathe. I'm making a Ujjayi type sound, but get that breath working. Let's really spread the nostrils and get a feeling of what it's like to start switching these muscles on. I call this wild breathing, because domesticated breathing is where we breathe through the mouth. Domesticated breathing is where the nose is shut down and the tissues are shut down. I'm just going to read the chat box and come back to you a second. Yeah, nice one. Thank you, Steph. Great. Okay, stay with that practice now. Stay with that a little bit. We could exaggerate it a bit more, but that's good for now. And you can flick the nostrils and start to really find these muscles. Now you've got 3 primary passageways through the nostrils here. And the intention in a Vedic style, a yogic style, conscious breath practice is to get those top passages open and the breath to rise up through there. So to do that, you've got to slow the breath down as well. Okay? So rest your tongue up at the top and see how slow you can take that inhale now. I'll explain a little bit about the problems with that in a second. See if you can flicker the nostrils open like a wolf or any other, like a dragon if you prefer, any other creature, any wild thing that breathes. You know, when it's in the forest or the jungle, it's going to smell its terrain. It's going to pick up on all those odors, those fragrances, those pheromones. You know, and we have similar organs in our nose, and we're learning to switch them back on. We're going wild. Let's see how slow you can make it now. If you get into breathlessness, by which I mean the feeling of panic in the system, like you've got to hurry the breath, that's an indication of a complex relationship in your system with the levels of carbon dioxide in your blood. So we're going to have a look at that in a minute. We're going to go to the next part of the practice in a second. So first thing is do your best for the rest of the session to breathe through your nose and get those nasal tissues open. You can bring your tongue forwards now to the point just behind the top teeth and relax the tip of the tongue so it's in very soft contact with the top of the back of the mouth. Very soft, gentle contact, very subtle. And then relax the jaw and make sure it's all relaxed. You've got a soft smile in place. There can be a little bit of space between the lips. A little kind of Buddha smile, something like that. And that helps to relax all the cranial nerves, the social engagement system in the cranial nerves. So we can start to create what I call space in the face. So just check you've got that steady, slow inhale. And we're going to come to the exhale in a minute. And what I want you to begin to understand is how I'm joining things together to give you a step-by-step approach to breath. Just check your shoulders, check they're down your back. The shoulder blades are down the back. The back of the head is back and up. Your head hasn't come forward here. That's going to make your breathing complicated. All right? So just check your body from time to time and stay with the breath. Now put your hands down on your belly. Put your hands right down your belly. 2 hands hugging that belly. And breathing in through the nose like we just did. See if you can come into the place where you expand that belly like a balloon. See how big you can make the belly there. And then breathe out. See how much you can squeeze that belly into the spine. So you're going to be starting to switch on the transverse abdominal muscles here. Fibers, the muscle fibers that run that way across the belly, around the belly. And you'll be switching those on to finish that squeeze at the end of the out breath. And just squeeze as much as you can right to the end of the out breath without contracting or collapsing the spine. And then breathe into that big belly feeling again. So we're going to find the optimal expansion on the inhale and the sense of effortless opening into that. And then the first half of the out breath is kind of elastic. And then the rest of it is going to be active as you squeeze those tummy muscles in. Right? So just play with that extent of the capacity here. And if you can, while you're doing that, feel into what your pelvic floor is doing. What is your pelvic floor doing in response to this breath? It's not always possible for everybody immediately to feel into the pelvic floor. So again, I have a range of practices that help people to find that embodied awareness. And partly it's because pelvic floors have been shamed. They're riddled with shame through thousands of years of interesting history. If you didn't know it, your pelvic floor structures are even named after shame. The Latin names are rooted in the Latin name for shame. So if you go to Germany, the name of the pubic bone, for example, is the Schambein, the bone of shame. And the nerves are named after pudere, which is Latin for shame. So it's okay if you don't feel it, is what I'm saying. It takes time sometimes, just like it takes time sometimes to open the nose. And this is the point of systematics. Right, great. Get that belly really going. And the next time you come to a full inhale, just take that full inhale and relax into it. Close your eyes maybe. Feel that breath and just hold the breath. Hold the breath in the body and start to feel what's happening on the inside. This is not a competition to hold the breath. I don't want you to just push in that kind of willful, a kind of yang way. I want you to really feel in a soft yin approach to what's happening in your body. I want you to feel for your signs, the symptoms, if you like, of the body wanting to breathe. The diaphragm will respond. The phrenic nerve will fire up. There'll be something happening in there. And notice it. And whenever your body wants to breathe, it might be a little bit of an in-breath, it might be straight into an out-breath. Whatever it is, just go into that movement there and let it happen. And then take another 3 breaths, 4 breaths maybe, and then do it again. And we'll do a total of 3 times. 3 times, what I call a soft breath hold like this. And this soft breath hold is simply about feeling into your system to find out how is your relationship with carbon dioxide in the blood today. Why I'm saying that is because what makes you breathe in primarily, what makes you breathe in is the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood. And when adrenaline and stress hormones are fired into the system, it changes our relationship to carbon dioxide, and we tend to get more into a breathless state. So it can vary from day to day, from moment to moment. It can depend on whether you've eaten or not as well. So many factors that come into play. So no judgment around it, but just noticing it, how it is. So if you're going to work with extending the length of your inhale and exhale, you have to address your relationship internally to carbon dioxide and find a higher level of resilience to carbon dioxide in the system. And we start this process in a systematic approach. We want to start this practice from the soft breath hold, the yin end of the spectrum, not by going straight into the yang end and holding your breath for as long as possible and turning it into some kind of Olympic competition or something like that. It's not what it's about. That's later. Yeah. Good. Right. Just 3 times and feel how it is. Now, if you feel into that, you'll notice that your pelvic floor in that movement, and tell me if I'm wrong. I'm always open to challenges and questions and everything else like that. Really, really am, okay? But your diaphragm, the respiratory muscle, is flattening down. It's contracting and it's flattening down like this, pressing down on top of the intestines. So the pelvic floor is doing this little dance like this, pushing down with it. So the diaphragm and the pelvic floor are doing this little reciprocal dance. Yeah? Diaphragm relaxing, yeah? Pelvic floor lifting. Diaphragm contracting, pelvic floor contracting. I beg pardon, pelvic floor pushing down. Yeah? So it's like this. Okay? And you feel that when you're doing that practice. Great. So the pelvic floor, as part of the respiratory balloon, is a really integral part to breath work as well. And I teach a lot of stuff using the pelvic floor in this, and you can get it over time. You can gain a lot of control in the different areas of the pelvic floor, the different domains: the front, the back, the middle, left side, right side, and you can work very powerfully with these practices to change the way you're breathing and understand through time and through practice. And the second power I'm coming into here, which is the power of discipline in the second, right? So take that full, deep, conscious breath in again. Actually, change your mind. Can you come to a squat for a second? Come to a squatting position if you can. Let's just try this little game. It might be interesting to try and see what happens for you. Great stuff. I think I haven't got much time today. I've only got an hour. Tell me if I'm wrong, Steph, but I think I've only got an hour. But so I haven't got much time.
You can go to an hour and a half.
Okay, thank you, Steph. Thank you. All right. So get this in a squatted feeling. Now check first of all that your knees feel okay. You don't have to go too low if it's too complicated, if you've got knee trouble. Yeah. And just check that you can spread your toes open. Can you get your toes open? And again, just checking. If you run your hands along the line of your femurs, along the line of your femur bone, that's the long leg bone down to your knee, and see if that line, see if it points out pretty much through your second toe. Yeah. If it does, we're okay in terms of rough kind of functional alignment. It's kind of useful to do that because I don't want you to hurt your knees, basically. I want you to look after your knee joints, right? Now, if your heels aren't on the floor, put something underneath them to lift up a little bit so you're a bit supported there, because that'll be more beneficial. And if you need to, you can hold onto a chair or something in front of you. There's many ways to make this work. You can really okay to hold on to something, or you can stay a bit higher. That's also good. All right. Now, what I want you to do is to come up from wherever you are in your squat and lift up about 24 inches, about somewhere between a foot and 2 feet, and come up. But notice what's happening in your body and come down again slowly. Okay. Some of you came up very fast, and if you go very fast, you probably won't notice as well, what's possible. So come up a bit slower this time. Come up slowly and feel what is happening with your breath, what is happening with your pelvic floor. Anybody? What's happening with your breath? Was it an in-breath, an out-breath? You're holding your breath? What's going on? There's got to be something happening with the breath. So do it a couple of times. Just check in. Claire's setting in, up, inhale, go up. Any votes on this? Any further? Chuck them in there. Inhale and effort up. Yeah. Generally, 99% of people will find they're doing an inhale on the way up. That's what happens. Now that should be of interest. Okay. So when you, this is to do with evolution, by the way. This is about my background as a biologist, long time ago, 40 years of breathwork practice with yoga and qigong and all sorts of things. But before all that, I was a biologist. Yeah. So that's that. And I'm still a biologist, still a scientist. So I love this kind of functional anatomy, sciencey type stuff. It's part of my bag. It's part of my thing. All right. Now that in breath on the way up, what part of your pelvic floor is lifting up? Is it the front or the back? Or is it the left or the right? What are you feeling in there as you lift up? Can you go more subtle in your awareness? Give it another go. You might find some more details, some more specificity. Yeah. Front, yeah, well done. It's the front of the pelvic floor, isn't it? For most of you, depending on how you come up, because there are ways of tracking it through the back of the pelvic floor, through the anal triangle, but mostly what you're going to find as you come up is it's going to fire up the front of the pelvic floor, what's called the urogenital triangle. So when you come up from squatting to standing, it's an in-breath, but your pelvic floor goes up. Is that right? Magic. Now, when we were sitting a little while ago, we were sitting doing the breath, and on the in-breath, the diaphragm comes down, the pelvic floor comes down. It was doing this, wasn't it? Do you remember? But now you've just come to squatting, and on the in-breath, the pelvic floor is going up. So it's doing the polar opposite. Isn't that fascinating? Great. It is fantastic, isn't it, when you can find things out like this? Now, some of you may know that already, for sure, all right? But some of you don't. And that should be really useful information if you're interested in breath work, because we've just talked about the respiratory balloon of the abdomen, how it's all related. All the abdominal structures are all connected to breathing. So if your pelvic floor is doing different things when you're squatting or standing or moving, that's kind of good to know that. Yeah, great. So we can play with the pelvic floor. And again, in systematic approaches to conscious breathwork, we do a lot of things where you can start to use your pelvic floor to change your emotional experience, your physiological experience, and your psychological experience, because those three things are all related. Right? There is no two things here. There is no mind and body. It doesn't make any sense. That's passé now. That's done and over. With Rene Descartes and people like that, and that's over. All right. So there's one thing here, It's a mind-body environment continuum. All of us in the same boat, all of us living this, all expressions. So take a breath in, just take a breath in. Take a breath in and feel that in-breath into your belly for a start. And I'm going to get you to change the experience in a moment. Yeah? Spread those nostrils. Remember to spread those nostrils. Tongue behind the top teeth really helps to relax the jaw and the social engagement systems. Because sometimes when we focus, there's a neural linkage which makes us tighten the jaw muscles. So tongue behind there helps to relax those neural linkages, right? Soft gaze with the eyes or eyes closed is really helpful as well, right? Because there's a link between the eyes and the suboccipital muscles on the back of the head, which we can talk about another time. These things are really important to know. Very good. Yeah. Now then, take the out breath. Squeeze the out breath all the way. Finish the out breath. Squeeze the tummy muscles in, pulse them a couple of times. And when you do that, you will probably feel the front and middle, the urogenital triangle of the pelvic floor squeezing in and up. Can you feel it? Is it doing it? If you can't feel it, do it anyway. Yeah? And then breathe in, holding the front and middle of the urogenital triangle. Hold it in and up slightly. Rest your hands on the side ribs and notice what happens as you breathe in. Do you notice the ribs move? Yeah? Is that what's happening? It is weird and cool. It's fantastic. It's all to do with evolution, by the way. I haven't got time to tell you what it's all about today. We can do that some other time. I've got courses online, by the way. Selling moment there. Did you catch that? Look, of course, online with some of this stuff in. But yeah, great. Now then, what's happening here, all right, is when your diaphragm flattens down, yeah, and this is why it works to get, because that pelvic floor lift on the in-breath gets you from squatting to standing. And before we had chairs, I'm sitting cross-legged on the floor here, by the way. I live in a caravan. I'm in my caravan at the moment. So before we had chairs, we had to get up off the floor by squatting. Is that right? So part of the way of doing that is by switching on the front line of the body. So there's a connection of muscle structures from your feet, from the medial arch of your feet, through the inside and front of your legs, into your pelvic floor, that lifts up the front of your body so your chest lifts up. If you want to check it out, go to squatting again, and you'll notice your chest lifts up on that inhale lift. So that's all part of your evolutionary structure and how you get from the floor up to standing if you weren't hanging around on sofas and chairs and all the kind of things that human beings do these days. Yeah, and that's an in-breath to do that. Great. So we can use those principles in breath work, and I, for one, certainly do. Great. So if you take the next exhale and finish that exhale and squeeze those tummy muscles in and pulse the urogenital triangle, you may pulse the rest of the pelvic floor, but certainly the urogenital triangle, and squeeze it up. Again, feel those side ribs. Just hold the pelvic floor in up a little bit, and that is connected neurologically, that's through the nerves, and fascially through the weave of tissues from the pelvic floor into those belly muscles at the bottom. And so that's going to squeeze those belly muscles in a little bit as well. So it's going to change the way you breathe. So you notice the ribs start to switch on, right? So what happens there is that when the diaphragm flattens down slightly, yeah, and the pelvic floor is lifting a bit, then what happens is the diaphragm meets the pressure in the intestines, which are squashed and pushed up slightly, and it can't or won't push down further than that. When it meets that pressure, it stops and it changes the way it works. Neurologically, it changes the way it works, and the diaphragm then switches on from the ribs and pulls onto the central tendon and starts to open the ribs up instead. And you can feel that when you're doing the breathing there. And that gives you a really powerful differential approach to breath work. You've got a whole range of capacities instantly there in terms of how you work with the gymnastic tendencies or possibilities of the pelvic floor in terms of how that affects your breath. So let's play with that a little bit more. Really good with that? So why do you breathe out when getting up? Somebody is breathing out when you're getting up. That is a good question, but I haven't got time to go into that now. It's very rare. It's very unusual. Some people, when they breathe in, for example, you might breathe in. If you breathe in, is everybody belly breathing here when you breathe in? Is everybody getting a belly breath? Or is there somebody getting breath up in the chest? Somebody getting the breath up in the chest here. Because this is called paradoxical breathing or reverse breathing, and sometimes it happens. And there are several different reasons for that. Some of it's habitual, some of it's postural, and some of it's because of other aspects of physicality. All right. Now, Any of you people there doing, so that's, if you want to check me later, I'll come back to that question later. I will try and come back to it, but that's a bit of a complex one. But first, before we go aside, another key element of breath work is how it affects your mind. Breath is what I call the magic key. It's a way into the mind, it's a way into your emotions, it's a way into the body, and it connects you into the whole universe. So take another breath in. Why are you breathing? Let me know why you're breathing. Why does breath happen? Have you got any idea? Any doctors or scientists or medicos or biologists or anything like that? Anybody know? Well, you breathe in to get oxygen into the system. That's why. Why do you need oxygen in the system? What does oxygen do? Where does oxygen come from? To feed the cells, almost. Yeah, metabolism, indeed. But what does metabolism mean? What do you mean by that? So let's get really specific for a moment, because this is important information, right? Because then it comes down to how you're breathing again and understanding this stuff, especially if you're going to be a breath worker. I think you need to understand this stuff. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Steph there, thank you. And right, so the oxygen goes into your blood, obviously, is carried around in the red blood cells in this amazing pigment called hemoglobin, which has evolved several times over in our evolution, but it's pretty astonishing stuff, because what it does is picks up loads of oxygen in high concentration and releases it in low concentration in the tissues, which haven't got so much oxygen. It's really clever at doing that. It's neat, a neat, incredible pigment like that, right? There are others. Insects have a green pigment, some of them anyway, all right? Right, for example. However, that oxygen is dropped off into the tissues in high carbon dioxide concentrations, and it goes into the cells. And what it does is enable you to release energy from glucose. So it goes into a specific part of the cell called a mitochondria. And if you're interested, by the way, you know you're not one organism, don't you? You know that's about 2,500 billion years ago, you evolved from bacteria. This is a story. There's loads of evidence for this. Don't believe if you don't want to, but science doesn't need belief. Got tons of evidence, right? Now then, you evolved from bacteria. Two bacteria got together. And one of those bacteria lived inside the other one. And the one that used to live inside the other one was called a mitochondria now. And that's the one that enabled you to become a complex multicellular organism. Because before that, everything was single cellular. Single cells buzzing around the planet. Those of them called bacteria. Right? So we evolved out of a combination of bacteria and a few other bits and pieces. And that mitochondria, yeah, lives inside every single one of your cells, almost, apart from red blood cells. Yeah? And you've got them in there, and they release oxygen from sugars, glucose specifically. Where do you get your glucose from? Well, you eat food. It comes from your chips or your rice and peas or whatever you eat. Yeah, whatever you eat, that breaks down and you produce sugars in your system. And that sugar, the glucose, is broken down in the mitochondria. But to break it down, it has to have oxygen in there to allow the electrons to be moved. Yeah, so it creates an electron transport chain to free the protons from that food stuff so that you can use those to make a way of carrying energy. Now, if you think about that, I've got a wood burner stove in my caravan here, which is right next to me. Here's a wood burner stove. And that wood burning is the same as the energy release in your system. So if you think about a fire and the energy release of that, what your body does is this incredible task of taking that glucose and catching that energy and wrapping it up in what's called a phosphate bond. It is phenomenal. It's utterly phenomenal. And it can carry it around the system and use it around the system, right? But it has to have oxygen there. Otherwise, the whole system backs up. It stops and you're dead. That simple, right? So the oxygen helps produce carbon dioxide and water, which is why there's more carbon dioxide in the tissues, because you're busy making it, right? By the way, you're also producing light, but that's another story. We'll come back on the other day. So when you've got that system working like that, keeping your mitochondria working well is fundamentally important. When the mitochondria become sick, your cells die. They die. It's that simple. In fact, the mitochondria kill them. The mitochondria are responsible for cell death. When that oxygen transport system doesn't work well, you get loads of reactive oxygen species. You get damage in your cells. You get sick. Yeah. So keeping everything working and so if you just do unconscious breath work, just breathing through the mouth, because that's what somebody tells you to do, not thinking about what you're doing or paying attention to your physiology, you can be complicating your system. You can cause problems in your system. People who take too many antioxidants actually cause problems in their system. because antioxidants get rid of the reactive oxygen species, but we need reactive oxygen species. Reactive oxygen species, too many of them cause damage, and they're also cellular neurotransmitters, or cellular transmitters. They communicate information within cells and tell cells what to do. So we need a balance of them. So people who take too many supplementary antioxidants actually are causing problems in their system. So understanding how the system works is crucial, but that's what's happening. Where does the oxygen come from? It comes from plants. Take a breath in. That air you're breathing in, the oxygen in that air, has come from the trees, the grass, the cacti, the algae in the sea. Every green thing that's out there is busy making oxygen, and you're breathing it in. Where does the sugar come from? That your cells, you're listening to me now. Your brain is working. It takes a lot of energy to do that. I'm talking quite fast, I know. I hope you can stay with me. I want to get as much information across as I can, forgive me, all right? But that listening you're doing, the talking I'm doing, the seeing, everything, you're breathing, your cells, your muscles are working, that is all fueled by glucose. Where does the glucose come from? It comes from plants. Plants make that glucose from sunlight and water and carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide that you breathe out, right? Planet was rich in carbon dioxide anyway. We don't need to be here. We need the plants, they don't need us. Apart from compost, we make good manure. Yeah. So other than that, yeah, they are producing glucose from sunlight and carbon dioxide and water, which fuels your body, your mind, and everything you do. And to make that work, to be able to extract the energy out of that, which they make in the green leaves, you have to have oxygen go into your mitochondria to strip those bits apart and free up the energy from it. And that's why you breathe. That's the only reason you breathe. Take a breath. Take 2 breaths. Feel it. Great stuff. Let's come back to practice again after that little lecture on internal respiration. I hope that was okay. I wasn't too much for anyone. All right. So take a breath in again. Take a breath in. So now remember to breathe through the nose. Spread those nostrils. In yoga talk, they say when you spread the nostrils and lift the air up, that's where you take prana in. That energizes life energy. And we know from Western science that affects your brain. It affects your limbic system. It changes the way you feel. If you breathe through the mouth, yeah, it causes complications. Some people who end up breathing through the mouth all the time have psychological disorders as well as physiological disorders. So take a breath through the nose for a moment. Really take your time to slow down the inhale and make the exhale as long as you can. Make the exhale as long as you can. Finish the exhale. Squeeze those tummy muscles in at the end of the exhale. Squeeze the muscles in the front and middle of the pelvic floor in and up slightly. And keep pulsing them gently as you breathe in. And get the breath spreading front and side and back of the body. Front, side, back of the body. Gently, front, side, back of the body. Belly opening, lower ribs opening. And see if you can get all the 11 spaces between the ribs opening. Shoulder blades down the back of the neck long and back slightly. So it feels like you're breathing into the top of the head. Hold the in-breath just for a moment. And then breathe slowly out. Start to feel all the muscles that make that breath happen. Feel them all. Breathing out, relaxing them. Everything's relaxing on the out breath. Until you get into the tummy muscles at the end of the out breath, which are contracting to squeeze in. Then squeeze the pelvic floor up again. Gently squeeze the pelvic floor up. Feel it. Hold the breath out for a moment. And then breathe in from there, gently pulsing the pelvic floor. That'll increase the pressure in the abdomen a little bit and make you switch the ribs on, remember. So you start to get those rib spaces opening up and you start to get to full respiratory capacity. Now I'm an older gentleman. I'm in my 60s. I went for a lung function test recently and I have 120% of lung function for somebody of my age. 120%. Great. And that's because the lungs expand, all the muscles can stretch and expand. So if you're going to be doing full breathing practices, it's really useful to have all these muscles opened. I've got lots of different movement practices which enable that to work. You have to have twists in the spine, for example, or the ribs can't move properly. Specific twists. You can look on there's some on my website for free. There's a whole thing on my website you can go to. There's a whole thing on my website you can go to, a free movement practice called the Nagas up there, which is really good. And that's got some of the spinal twists in it, really good for opening the rib spaces at the back of the body. Right. So just come with that, stay with that breath and see if you can get it down. Now, it's possible to get your breath like this if you work with the respiratory anatomy like this, to get the breath so you get down to 1 breath a minute. It's quite easy. 2 breaths a minute is really quite doable. 1 breath a minute is fairly easy. Yeah. Now you're staying present to the breath. You're staying fully here, fully now. And you're learning to be deeply relaxed and fully present to the breath at the same time. So presence and relaxation. If it helps, close your eyes. Otherwise, 3/4 close them. Or have them open. Again, eye positions change your practice. Okay, so far, how are we doing? A few more breaths like this. Give you a couple of minutes to practice this and see how long and slow you can make it. Now, when you consider that most people in the post-industrial age breathe 12 to 20 breaths a minute, are living in a state of relative breathlessness, a gentle panic with carbon dioxide levels because of the stress of modern life with COVID and mobile phones and relentless amounts of information to be processed. You have the capacity to take control of your nervous system and de-stress it and live an optimal life. You have the power to do that. We know full well that the mitochondrial coherence, the way the mitochondria communicate with each other. Here you feel a tightness in your back. The way the mitochondria communicate with each other, and they do communicate with each other in the body, is of crucial importance. Okay. Now notice what your heart is doing. Stay with this practice, long the breath. I could take you into rebirthing breathwork or something else, but we're doing systematics here. So I'm not going to take you there today. Tongue behind the top teeth, remember. Relax the jaws, space in the face. If you remember all these little pieces we talked about. Open the nostrils wide. Get that wolfy breath happening. Or dragon breath, whatever you want. Lion breath, I don't mind. Yeah, okay. Relax into it. Okay, I should be doing a little bit on breath holding as well for you, shouldn't I, really? So another 4 or 5 breaths like this and see how you can get into this. See how much you can drop into this practice. And breathwork is a lot about relaxation. And it will take you into a deep stillness in the mind. You know, cognitive thinking patterns in the brain are simply there to solve problems. And people get so addicted to thinking because that's what they think they are. They think they're thinking. And you can have still states of awareness, just pure soft awareness with no thought going on for long periods of time, as long as you can relax into it and feel comfortable with not having any thoughts. But most people are so addicted to thinking they can't go there. And that's a shame, because that means they can't ever access that state of inner peace that is so readily available. So relax into not thinking, just being present, just being aware. Allow yourself to go there. And if you notice any panic in the system when thinking stops, just check it, notice it. It's really useful information again. You can just go in deeper. Again, we've got a lot of breath-based strategies to enable you to go deep, like really deep in. If you're getting down to 2 breaths or 1 breath a minute, you're going to go there. Like I said, most people breathing 12 to 20 breaths a minute in a slight panic state because there's so much adrenaline running through the system, so much fear, so much stress, so much anxiety. Okay. And take a pause there for a moment. Okay, great stuff. And then take a full deep inhale. Spread your nostrils wide, full deep inhale. And just gently hold the breath in the body now. Hold the breath in. I recommend dropping the chin slightly, just a little bit, and squeezing the chin a little bit, because that pressurizes the carotid sinuses in the neck here. And there are chemoreceptors in the carotid sinuses and pressure receptors. So that by squeezing slightly, you're changing the information that's going to your brain. It helps you relax into the breath hold. And squeeze your tummy in just very gently, like giving the breath, the intestines a soft cuddle. And hang out with that breath hold now. And this time, rather than doing a soft breath hold, I want you to do a willful breath hold and see how long you can hold the breath. Remember, every breath you breathe is courtesy of the plants, courtesy of the forests. It's time we remember this as a human species. And conscious breath work is powerful because it will take us into that place of remembering just how much we have to look after this planet. It's time for us to wake up and start caring. Every breath you breathe is courtesy of plants, courtesy of the vegetation. Every movement of your muscles, every movement of mind is courtesy of the plants, courtesy of the vegetation. That's the way it is. You don't have to believe it. It doesn't require a belief system. It's just the way it is. Stay with the breath hold if you can. Notice what happens when you push the breath hold. Notice what happens in your system. What happens? Do you get into a panic state? If you go long enough, you will do. Right. So if you've got the panic state, yeah, that's great. Because I want you to experience the panic. That's your body reacting to carbon dioxide in the blood. Right? That panic is your body thinking it's dying because of the carbon dioxide levels in the blood. It's got nothing to do with how much oxygen is in there, right? Your lungs, you've got, what, I don't know, 3 to 5 liters of oxygen in your lungs, in lung space. You've got, with an in-breath hold, you've got lots of oxygen in there. It's what, 18% when it goes in, 16% of oxygen when it comes out. So even when you breathe out, it's still loads of oxygen. You've got something like 21 trillion red blood cells in your body. It's a phenomenal amount. Each one of those has many, many, many hemoglobin molecules, all carrying 4 oxygen molecules. So you've got so much oxygen in your system, it's untrue. And as a relatively healthy human being, you don't have to be that healthy. Your blood is going to be saturated with oxygen to around about 96, 97%. 98%, possibly even 99. So you've got so much oxygen in there. So if you, after a few seconds, you're wanting to breathe in, that's because your body is in a state of panic, not because you need to breathe in. It's just an habituated state in your system. So breath holding is a really helpful way of doing that. But to do that effectively, you need some more systematics, okay? And you need discipline. The second power I was talking about, I'm not going to get through the 4 powers tonight. The second power I was going to talk about was discipline. Discipline comes from, I'll come back to the breath hold in a minute. Discipline simply comes from a Latin word disciplus, which means to follow. Now, it doesn't mean beating yourself up. It doesn't mean pushing really hard. It doesn't mean some yang kind of masculine drama about, being some champion or anything like that. It doesn't mean any of that. What it means is to follow. So it's the root word of the word disciple. And what you're following is something that speaks to you of truth, of goodness, and you feel something in your system that you're responding to. So if you're going into breath work and you feel amazing, there's something in there for you to listen to. And you hone that and you follow that and you find out more about it, more about it, more about it, more about it, and track it down and find your way through the best you can. And that's what discipline is. It's about chasing goodness. It's becoming a goodness detective, not anything else. All right. So you're listening to what feels right, listening to what feels true, listening to what feels beautiful in your system. So it's a very different thing to just beating yourself up. But to get your system to work effectively, you have to understand your biology as well. So if you want to make changes to the way your brain works, and you can change the structure and the function of your brain by breathwork practice and meditation. I teach meditation as well, and embodied awareness practices. So if you're going to change those structures and make them work differently, you have to do it on a regular enough basis to break the habits that your body's already got. So if you've got 20, 30, 40 years of habit in your system, it's going to take you on, you're going to have to practice on a regular enough basis to get that strategy in place of leverage to get that shift. If you think of got an ocean tanker, a tanker carrying oil, those huge big ocean tankers, they take like 3 miles to turn around. You can't just turn them around. It takes time. And if you've got 10, 20, 30, 40 years of practice of habit in your body, it's going to take time to turn it around. So getting the regular leverage in there, doing something differently is really important. And that's the power of discipline. Power of systematics, power of discipline. When you do a breath hold, the breath hold I usually teach first is an outward breath hold. All right. Now, I'll tell you why. Anybody do emotions? Anybody has emotions in this space? In this Zoom room? Does anybody have emotions? Anybody do emotions at all? Nobody? I do plenty. The emotions are what makes us mammals. Yeah. Emotions are what make us mammals. They connect us. They enable us to feel separate from other, I don't feel loved anymore, or connected. And they enable us to feel those things inside of ourselves, right? They're powerful. They're motivating us. They move us. Emotions are what make us do things. Yeah. They make you get out in bed in the morning or not get out of bed in the morning. They drive us. They're powerful. More powerful than thinking half the time, although thinking and emotions are deeply related. And emotions come out your body. Right? Emotions come out your body. They come out the sensations in the body, and they're translated out of sensation. And your brain then translate those into what you consider to be emotions. But they're powerful. Now, as a child, when you did difficult emotions, before you became a cognitive self, before you began to use your brain in a very clear, cognitive, abstract, and formal way, what you did was mostly do emotions when you were around about 2, 3, and 4. And depending on how your parents were, they would have taught you how to do emotions, and they would have probably struggled with your emotional being and would have taught you to not feel certain things. So whatever feelings you weren't allowed to feel, you would have learned how to manage those in your body. How do you manage difficult feelings in your body? Anybody know? Yeah, anybody? Well, the answer is through breathing. You stop breathing. That's right. Gara's got it. Stop breathing. You hold your breath. Exactly. Well done. Okay. So the way we learn to manage difficult, complex feelings and trauma as well, initially, is to hold our breath. Yeah. Now, just practice holding your breath and squeeze your tummy in and feel what that does to your breathing muscles. Yeah. And feel it tighten up around the diaphragm. Can you feel that? Great. So if, my life was not just a bed of roses. It wasn't, I've had my own share of struggles and sufferings, and I'm sure you have as well in different ways. So if you've had any, difficult neglect, abuse, struggles in your childhood as you're growing up, you would have learned how to do emotions in a fairly complex way, right? And you will have learned how to navigate those emotions in a fairly complex way. And a lot of that will have been somatically with your body. You will have used breathing muscles to control, manage, and hold those emotions. Holding breath holds emotions. That's right. It holds them instead of processing them. It does exactly that. So one of the complicated, and if you want to have a breathing practice where you can go in and really free up your emotions, this is one of the reasons I teach an out breath hold first. Then if you want to get the diaphragm, which is the big breathing muscle, really free, there's only one way I know to free the diaphragm. Now, I'm not sure if I can do it at the moment because I'm not sure if I've got enough space in my belly because I ate a big slab of homemade sourdough bread a little while ago, so we'll find out, okay? But it looks like this. Oh, okay, a second. That position on a held out breath is the place where the diaphragm, because the diaphragm contract when it goes down, remember it contracts. Yeah. And when it comes up, it relaxes and it comes back up again. So if you've got a held out breath, if you hold your breath in, the diaphragm is contracted. Yeah. So if it's got some tension in there from emotional holding, and by the way, pretty much everybody has to some degree or another, and around the intercostal muscles, around the ribs and everywhere else in the belly. So if you've got that emotional holding patterns in place like that, then you can't do it on a held in breath. You've got to go to a held out breath. You've got to breathe out and then learn to switch on the external intercostal muscles between the ribs here and open those ribs up. So I'll show that again a little bit. I'll show you what I mean, okay? So part of you've done, you've got nice big belly, big round belly on the in-breath, yeah? Out breath, squeeze this in, yeah? And then you've got to be able to engage the muscles between the ribs here without breathing in. So you've got to get those arms open. And normally you just use these muscles when you breathe in. So you're breathing in, there they are. Yeah. So when you're doing on a held out breath, you have to be able to go into your brain first of all, get into your own head and find those nerves that switch those muscles on. You can do it. Anybody can do it, by the way. It just takes practice. It takes systematics and discipline. Chasing the goodness, remember. Yeah. So it takes those two things. And then you can get in and you can get that diaphragm to stretch out and release. And that is an impressive practice. Okay. So that's from yoga land. It's called Uddiyana Bandha. All right. That's the Sanskrit name for it. But that practice is a key part of creating the emotional freedom in your body. And when you come into that, when you start going into that, any unprocessed emotions that are held in your body start to get released. You can do it through rebirthing breath work as well. But hey, why give yourself all that emotional trauma in rebirthing breath work when you clear it so easily with a breath hold? Just a suggestion. Right? My first experience of rebirthing type breath work was utterly sublime, powerful, divine, because I've done enough systematic work to free up my system in the first place to take me there. So it's not just some therapeutic transformational release. It's much, much, much more. And that's what systematics gives you, is the capacity to go way deeper than anything else, starting with the shoulder blades, get those back, get the ribs open, understand your body, understand what you're doing with the breath. All right, talking a lot. I hope you're catching some of this. Get what's useful. All right, do you want to fancy giving that a go? See if you can do it? Okay, I'll take you through it briefly, okay? Now, the other important thing about breath holding, just before I go into that, is how you come out of breath holding. And again, there's a lot of what I call grubby breath holding on the internet. You can go in there. There are very famous teachers out there who are teaching what I call grubby breath holding, because when they finish a breath hold, they come out like this. Okay. Now, what are you building into your system when you're doing that? You're building panic. You're breathing in from a place of panic. So what you're creating neurologically is more panic. You're telling your body, panic. Is that what you want? You want more panic in your life? Well, cool, then do it then. Right? But if you don't want to get panic in your life, if you want something else, then you've got to breathe. When you do a breath hold, you've got to breathe in a relaxed way. So this is my strategy for you, okay? You ready? Whatever breath hold you do, we're going to do an out breath hold in a minute. When you come out of the breath hold, you've got to do three things. One is relax all the muscles you're using first. So whatever muscles are holding, so for example, I'm doing this one here. I can breathe and not breathe and talk, believe it or not. So you release all the muscles. Yeah. Then you smile and you relax, top down smile. And then you breathe in, conscious breath in, spread your nostrils. Okay, so that's three things. Release the muscles, smile. It's so important to smile. That's a muscular, emotional approach to relaxation, plus a top-down regulations from your brain down saying it's all good. It really is all good. Yeah. So you're teaching your system to deeply relax, and then you take a conscious inhale through the nose, not the mouth, through the nose, spreading those nostrils wide, lifting the breath up like I showed you. Right. And that is going to train your system in holding the breath and coming out of that in a state of delight, joy, peace, bliss, pure goodness. Yeah. Feeling amazing, not coming out and building panic into your system. You ready to give it a go? Is that, give me some thumbs up here. Give me some response. Give me some feedback. Come on. Thank you. Fantastic. Great. Great stuff. All right. Yeah. So, put my shirt back on a second. Now, from here, let's take a couple of breaths in first. Just slow, steady, full breaths. Full inhale. Through the nose, remember, tongue behind the top teeth, everything I've shown you. And breathe out slowly. One more breath. Full, steady, slow inhale. Feel all the muscles of the body working. Make sure your back and neck is long. Yeah. Snake your spine if you need to. It's all good. And breathe out slowly. Squeeze the breath out. Bring the front and middle of your pelvic floor inwards and upwards. Squeeze the tummy in towards the spine. Now see if you can open those ribs up now. Doesn't matter how much they go. Yeah, so you can open them up. Lengthen the back of the neck. Drop the chin in towards the chest. Right? You're going to press in on the carotid sinuses gently. Glottis is the diaphragm. Of course it is. So is the tentorium on the top of the head. Okay, loads of diaphragms in the body. Soles of the feet too. All right? But hold that breath out. I had a Rolf called the diaphragm, the muscle of walking. I had a Rolf from Rolfing practice. She called the diaphragm the muscle of walking because it's connected fascially through the quadratus lumborum, down into the psoas, down to the legs, all the way down to the feet. Conversely, the feet are the muscles of breathing, just as much as everything else is. Hold that breath out. We don't breathe down to legs, really. Obviously, we just breathe into lungs. But the experience of breathing as if into the legs is a profound practice. It's really grounding. Earthing practice. Hold that breath out as long as you can. And remember, you go for it. Go for it as long as you can until you feel your body going into that neurological panic state. If you can't contain it, squeeze your tummy in a little bit, just like you're doing an extra bit of out breath. And come out of it by releasing the muscles, remember? Smiling, consciously relaxing, brain down, top down regulation. Yeah. And then conscious inhale, slow and steady and peacefully. And just practice that for a moment. Okay. Now you gradually build up your power of your breath hold over time. It changes day by day. It changes practice by practice. Has anybody heard of a thing called therapeutic intermittent hypoxia? Any therapists out there? Therapeutic intermittent hypoxia? It's breath holding. You know, the Nobel Prize for Physiology in 2019 went to some scientists who were looking at how oxygen affects communication within cells and metabolism within cells. Right? So, you know, this is a thing these days. Breath holding is becoming a thing, and it's a very important part. And it's important to do it well, because if you do it badly, again, if you just breathe in through the mouth the whole time, and you know full well as I do, there are breath practices out there that do that. They're just mouth breathing and then grubby breath holds, when they're not paying any attention to the neurological consequences or the physiological consequences of what they're doing. Right. So if you're doing practices like that, you're causing complexity in your system over time. You know, you can give yourself cardiovascular problems by mouth breathing over time. You can do that. Yeah? You can build up neurological panic in your system from breath holding and not releasing in a neurologically sane, comfortable, good way. So I highly recommend tuning into your biology and your psychology and what actually has these positive effects. Okay, so far? Anybody got any questions so far? Yawning's fantastic. I think you mean yawning, not yarning. Yarning is telling stories. Yawning is let's all do yawn. Heck, let's yawn. Can you yawn on demand? Oh, wow. Yawning's amazing, and they're beautifully infectious. Notice the amount of yawns going through the Zoom room now. Can you see them? Let's do it again. Come on, everybody go. Oh. Oh, wow. Yawning is an automatic regulation of carbon dioxide levels. It's a fantastic thing to do, right? It's really healthy. Most of us are taught not to do it. Yawning's good, sighing's good. Sighing's another really good one. If you want to do an instantaneous neurological drop, then you can do a double inhale and breathe in twice. So it's like doing a double inhale and then just sigh on the exhale. And let your system drop and collapse slightly. So you find a slight kind of, and do it again. If you find a shake happening, let shake happen. Yeah, I'll tell you how we discharge in a minute. Take a double breath in, and then breathe out. Now, discharge in a human being happens in a variety of ways: shaking, crying, laughing, talking very fast is another one, right? But some of those ways of discharge, natural mammalian ways of shifting emotional state into a more peaceful, relaxed state. So when we have a complex thing going on, maybe we're challenged or feeling a bit tired, or don't pay attention, our system can do that stuff. So if you notice when you're doing that breath, let's take another couple of breaths like that, double inhale. And an exhale. If you notice shake happening at the end of that or any part of that, just let your body shake. Get used to shaking. It is so good for you, right? And again, it's a way of clearing out stressy type hormones, stressy type responses in the system. Okay. Now, for my last 20 minutes or so, I'll run to an hour and a half. Oh yeah, out breath through the mouth. I'm talking about in breath through the mouth. It's a very bad idea. Actually, sometimes I teach people to breathe in through the mouth as well, my friend. But that's later on, because this is all about systematics and it's ultimately about integration. And most people have really bad habits of mouth breathing. So teaching people to mouth breathe when they already do bad habits of mouth breathing is a bad idea. So mouth breathing, inhaling through the mouth can be done, yeah, in specific circumstances. But generally, it's a very bad idea. There are no ultimate rules. There are exceptions to everything. But I think it's good to have these exceptions, not based on, well, I can't do it, or and again, most people teach nose breathing as far as mouth breathing, as far as I'm concerned, because they haven't learned how to breathe in through the nose. They haven't trained their own nose, so they teach mouth breathing. That's my vision. That's my view at the moment. I'm willing to change it, and I'm being quite mean about that, and I know that because I want to push the breathwork world towards understanding nose breathing, because it's really, really important for our well-being. And about your perineum lower pelvic floor, yes, there's lots of ways of working with the pelvic floor, which I can't go into now. It's way too complicated. And it's also important to work with your pelvic floor both in contraction and relaxation. Otherwise, you end up with a hypertonic pelvic floor where it's squeezed up too tight. And that's also a problem. Yeah, you can end up being, having pain when you wee and things like that if you keep it squeezed up too much, which some yoga practitioners do way too much of, by the way. Anyway, so anything anybody wants to cover before I close? We've got another 20 minutes. Just chuck some stuff up in the chat box if you want me to go over anything particular. We could do some more dynamic breath. We could do anything you want, really. Give me some ideas. This is make some command. Think about me as a genie for a moment. Rub the bottle and give you 3 wishes. Put your 3 wishes up there. Couple of seconds. Somebody just confirming on exhale. I would say, well, on Ankara, you're asking, just confirming on exhale, engage pelvic floor. Do you release when you inhale again? The pelvic floor can be used on the inhale or the exhale in its contracting form. So you could, if you want to go deeper into that, again, I've got stuff on my website around that. There are 5 parts to the pelvic floor that you can work with independently. Right? There's the anal triangle, Now, you all know anal triangles because you all, at some point, you were all potty trained or toilet trained, that kind of thing. So you've got the squeeze and the lift around the anal triangle, and you can feel that, yeah? Then there's the perineum in the middle of the pelvic floor, and then there's urogenital triangle at the front. And those three areas can be experienced and explored and worked with independently. Now, in 16 minutes or so, I don't have time to go into that today. And then you can also work independently with the left and the right of the pelvic floor. And there are different practices to enable you to get into those different areas and feel them differently in different powerful ways, in fact, really strong. So you get a really cohesive, clear and strong sense of that. So you can use any of those engagements on the in-breath or the out-breath, to answer that question. So it's not a simple rule, right? It depends what you're doing with the breath practice. So on the belly-based practice I got you to breathe into the belly and relax the pelvic floor. So that's relaxing on the inhale. Yeah? All right? Agreed? When you came to squat to standing, the pelvic floor contracted on the inhale. Remember, that was the two opposite, yeah? That's where we started. So the pelvic floor can relax on an inhale, it can contract on an inhale. It depends what you're doing with the breath. Yeah. So if you want to do a practice where you're elongating the breath and creating a sense of connection, let's do a little bit more on something because I think this is useful right now. Yeah. Then you can use that pelvic floor to change the patterning of the breath and the psychological consequences of the breath. So you can really affect what's happening in your brain with using some of these psychomuscular dynamics. That's where it becomes important. Okay, so in the beginning, it's just a kind of basic exploration, but it comes powerful later on. Let's see anything else is put in there. Now then, where was I going? Has anybody heard of heart rate variability? This is really important as well. HRV. Yeah. So you've got people like, what's the chappie's name? Dr. Alan Watkins. Have you heard of Dr. Alan Watkins? Anybody? I'll put it in the chat box for you. Dr. Alan Watkins. Now, again, I don't agree with everything he says. Yeah, I don't. I think he's got some really, really good things to say. A very smart man. Anybody heard Ken Wilber? Ken Wilber? Right, he's really, yeah, great. He's really into Ken Wilber stuff. So what links it into the integral stuff, those of you into Ken Wilber integral stuff like that, okay? And again, that's really useful. But the Alan Watkins staff is very much around what he calls coherent breathing. And for them, the rhythm of the breath is most important. If you go to somebody like Patrick McCowan from Oxygen Advantage, then it's all about the Bohr effect. It's all about how much carbon dioxide tissues. It's about, you know, they use this, what the term over breathing, which is not, I'm not a fan of that term. It's suboptimal breathing, but it's about the response to carbon dioxide, and that's their whole thing. And if you go to some systems, it's all about getting high. It's about getting ripped on the amount of, or the lack of oxygen in the brain. Because when you push the breath, do it through the mouth, it's awful. When you push the breath like that and keep doing it for 10 minutes, what you're going to do is you're going to push the carbon dioxide out of your blood, and you're going to reduce the amount of oxygen in your brain. So when you reduce the amount of oxygen in your brain, it's going to take your brain into a particular state. Yeah. So, you know, understanding all these different consequences and how you're playing with your own respiratory physiology gives you an angle into, or an advantage, if you like. But a lot of these different breath schools work with one thing. They have one thing they're working with, you know, and that's as Monty Python calls it. That's the shoe, The Life of Brian. It's the shoe. It's the thing. Okay. Now, what I'm interested in is wearing different footwear. I like sandals sometimes, you know, sometimes I go barefoot. I have a pair of Vivos. I have some other Feel Max, which are really nice barefoot shoes from Finland. You haven't tried them, they're worth trying. Yeah. You know, sometimes it depends what you want to wear, doesn't it? It depends what effects you want. So you've got to look at the overall, you know, cohesive understanding of all the different practices of breath work and what they can give you and what they do, and find out in your own system. Now, breathwork practitioners from schools I trained with, like I said, Qigong and yogic systems, it's 40 years of training. 40 years, that's a 40, yeah, to get you to the state of really understanding what you're doing. And it's a lifelong practice. As long as you're breathing, you've got practice. You know, don't know how long you're going to live. Yeah. And the last breath is a practice. And the point beyond the last breath is a practice. That's where the Bardo Thodol, the Tibetan book of living and dying, comes in. How do you die? How are you going to die? Are you going to die gracefully? Are you going to die happily? Or are you going to die in panic? Because your breath work connects to that as well. Yeah, you took your first breath when you came out your mama's womb, whichever way you came out. Yeah, you came out your mama's womb, you took the first breath. And that from that point, you've been breathing ever since. And at some point, you're going to take your last breath. And that last breath is going to be profound, as every other breath can be. So a lifestyle of conscious breath work. Now, one of my teachers 35 years ago, my yoga teachers 35 years ago, she was an amazing woman, fantastic woman teacher. She gave me a practice to make every single breath conscious all day long. Right? So if you can start to make your breath conscious all day and get your breath rate down to about 6 seconds on an inhale and 6 seconds on an exhale, regardless of what you're doing through the course of the day. So start with a little bit of discipline. Start with 5 to 10 minutes in the morning. I call it the 3-5-3-6-5. 5 minutes, 3 times a day, in the morning when you get up, at lunchtime before you eat, before you go to bed. And you start weaving little practices in like that, and you gradually build it up over months, over the years, into a practice where every single breath becomes conscious. When every breath is conscious, you have access to your unconscious mind. You have access to everything that's going on. There isn't anything left in your brain, body brain, that is unconscious. It's all there and visible. It's frightening and shocking at times, but it's there. You're not hiding it away in your tissues somewhere. And that is stunningly good. That's why, one of the reasons why we build a lifestyle of this. So start now. Start with short practices regularly, and build it up until, there are times when you can be sleeping and your body is still aware of the breath. 24 hours a day, there's breath awareness happening. Now, do anybody know the mantra Om? Have you come across the mantra Om? It's a hippie thing, isn't it? Yeah? Yeah, darn hippies, yeah? But actually, what that mantra refers to is the states of consciousness. The waking state, the sleeping state, the waking state, the dream state, the deep sleep state. That's beta, theta, and delta state in brainwave patterns. Yeah, so it refers to those 3 states, and then it refers to the continuity of consciousness, which joins all of those states together within the intelligence field of the whole universe. So why people chant that is to remember that in their bodies, because we are that. We're not. There's not you and the rest of the universe. That's a joke. Yeah, that game is over. So there's not you and something else. There's just the universe. There's just space-time doing its funk, and we happen to be that. Yeah. So Om is one of the practices from the yoga tradition which reminds people of that. Yeah, the continuity of consciousness. So when you get into that state where you're dreaming and you're awake in your dreams and you're lucid in your dreams and you're aware of your breath and you go into the deep sleep state and there's still awareness of breath, that is the mantra Om playing itself out. There's continuity of consciousness through all the states. Sleeping, dreaming, waking, every day, all the time. Now we've had somebody's just leaving a question there, Gavi. Gavi, slow down the in-breath for a while then, make it 4 seconds on the inhale. So my advice to you, heart rate variability, I've got so much to share with you, forgive me, and I'm running out of time. So I'll do my best to wrap this up a little bit, okay? I'm not doing a very good job of wrapping it up, I don't think, but there we go. I'll bounce back to heart rate variability because it's connected to the out-breath, all right? Heart rate variability is simply, when you breathe in, remember the diaphragm flattens down on the inhale. What happens is the pressure in here is reduced. And that's going to suck air in through whichever orifice you happen to be working with, ideally the nose. But yeah, by the way, when do horses breathe through their mouth? When they're dying. That's the only time they breathe through their mouth. Okay? When does any animal breathe through its mouth? Dogs don't breathe through their mouth. They pant through their mouth to cool themselves down because they don't have sweat glands. No animal breathes through its mouth apart from fish. Just saying. All right? Now then, heart rate variability, that reduced pressure in your chest, that sucks air in. And because there's reduced pressure in there, that means your blood is sucked back into your chest as well. And your lymphatic fluid is sucked back into your chest. It's the in-breath that makes your cerebrospinal fluid move. All your brain tissues and your spine are wrapped in this special fluid, cerebrospinal fluid, which cleans the brain, nourishes the brain, and that is moved with the breath. So of course, breath work is going to affect all of that. Now, when you take a breath in, all that fluid comes into the chest. The heart has to deal with that amount of fluid. So it speeds up and starts to increase its rate of pumping, right? And then when you breathe out, it decreases and slows down. The heart is the most electromagnetic organ in the body. It's 1,500 times more electromagnetic than the brain. Yeah? So if your brain and your heart are operating at different frequencies, you end up getting ill, by the way. There's plenty of science on this. You can look it up. It's at the Heart Math Institute. I'll put it up there for you. Look, Heart Math Institute. This is not, doesn't require any belief systems. You can look it up. Yeah. Heart Math Institute. So that's, you know, and so the heart rate variability is the capacity of your heart to shift rate on the in-breath and the out-breath. It speeds up on the in-breath and it reduces on the exhale. If it can't do that very well, that is indicative of your system being really stressed, along with your, you know, along with the capacity to not hold the breath for very long. You should be able to ideally hold the breath on a soft breath hold for between 20 and 40 seconds. If it's less than that, then breath holding practice is needed, systematics of breath holding practice. But you know, that heart rate variability should be able to fluidly dance like that. And if it can't, your system's too stressed, it's too stiff, and you're heading for trouble, right? And again, the Heart Math Institute, they have ways of checking that, and they know full well when somebody's heading towards a disease. So you can use something like heart rate variability monitor, which are really easy to get. You plug them on your ear, and they'll tell you what your HRV is. That aside, if you want to reduce the stress in your system and drop your system down, rather than increasing the in-breath to 6 seconds, which is where this is coming from, you're going to lengthen the out-breath, because the out-breath is going to drop your heartbeat rate. It's going to down-regulate your system. It's going to bring you down into a place of stillness and peace, right? So lengthen the out-breath. Focus on the out-breath first, and then just let the in-breath be. So if you struggle with the out-breath, lengthen the out-breath first, and let the in-breath arise out of that. If you want to have a calming practice, a mind calming practice, you'll have maybe 6 seconds on the inhale, aiming towards about 12 seconds on the exhale, something like that. That's an attempt to answer that question, I think, all right? So heart rate variability is really important, because when you reduce the heartbeat rate, the electromagnetic pulsing of the heart is reduced, and the brain settles down and calms down as well. So you're taking yourself into this calmer space with the out-breath. Okay? Hope that's helpful. Lots of stuff there for you to play with tonight, all right? Nearly finished. Got 5 minutes left. Anybody else want to direct the last 5 minutes of my time before I say thank you and goodbye? All right. Any tips for people with asthma? Yes, tips for people with asthma. If you've got asthma, then work. The stuff that Patrick McCallan talks about, the potato system, is very helpful for asthma. Yeah. So holding the breath out the body is really good for asthma. What happens on asthma is the tissues in the tubes in the lungs are getting inflamed on the inhalation. So if you can lengthen the exhalation, down-regulate, lengthen the exhale, soften the breath. Yeah. So go into the exhale, belly breathing, longer out breath, slow the out breath, and hold the out breath out. Hold the in-breath out gently. So start to get into breath holds to change your relationship to carbon dioxide. That will help with asthma. But the potato system, the stuff Patrick McCallan talks about in the oxygen advantage, that is really, really good stuff in terms of working with asthma. Okay, but just lengthening, regulating your breath is really good as well. Coming to a 6 second inhale, 10 second exhale, gentle breath holding, that'll kind of help a lot. Right, there's brown paper bag stuff as well, where you hold the breath out and increase your carbon dioxide levels. But there's slightly more of that, all right? You'll come across with potato and people like that. Anybody else? By the way, you know your breath changes from right to left every 30 to 40 minutes as well, don't you? Yeah?
Hi, Chris.
Somebody's calling something, I'm not sure what they're saying.
Oh,
I still don't understand, I can't hear you, sorry. So breath changes left to right every 30 to 40 minutes as well. And that comes into play with yogic pranayama, where they work with that. And one of the pieces of information we do have from science is, and this has been talked about a lot in yogic studies, is that alternate nostril breath is evidence to reduced anxiety. And also it changes blood flow to the opposite prefrontal cortex. So there are practices you can do with breath work would actually, again, change the way you're functioning. I'm busy producing an online course at the moment, and sometimes I work for long periods of time sitting at the computer. So what I do the whole time I'm working at the computer to keep in good flow, to keep my system relaxed and steady without getting any tension in my system, is do conscious breath work for extended periods of time. Get up, move, squat, do stuff, come back, work again. Yeah. So you can stay really focused and use conscious breath practices to go deep, really deep into focus as well. But it takes time and practice. I'm pretty much going to stop there. Somebody asked you a question there. Holding breath on in-breath or out-breath, where do you start? The answer to every question you ask me is going to be it depends. It depends where you're starting. It depends where you're coming from. Generally, like I said, generally, but not always, I start with an out-breath hold to get the diaphragm freed and released, to be able to get those ribs opening to release the diaphragm. Because generally it's an in-breath hold that we do emotional traumatic holding with. So if we've got, and most people have held emotion, held trauma in the system. So if you're doing an in-breath hold on top of held trauma, you're aggravating that, you're adding to it. Does that make sense? So that's why I like to teach out-breath holding first in terms of systematics. So that's the power of systematics I mentioned briefly. The power of, I haven't talked about half the things I was going to talk about. The power of discipline I mentioned. Yeah. The power of integration a little bit. So you've got to do the practices and get them woven into your life and start weaving them into your life. And the last one, which I very briefly mentioned, is the power of interdependence, which if you think back to what I said about plants, about every breath you take in, every piece of oxygen coming into your body, every piece of glucose your body and system, that is interdependence. There is only interdependence. Independence is an illusion. It's an illusion. So I want us to have Interdependence Day. Yeah? Let's do this, shall we? I'm out of here. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for tuning in and listening. Really appreciated your focus and your involvement. Thank you ever so much indeed. My website is christophergladwell.com. It's my name on the thing there, christophergladwell.com. And you can find out what I'm up to, join us, do stuff with us, come and find out more if you want to. And thank you very much indeed again. Bye-bye now. Good night.